Today, we're speaking with award-winning architect Riccardo Tossani. Housing Japan have been working with this Tokyo-based architect for many years now. Most recently, we've been collaborating on this set of super luxury villas that we're calling Raintree. These villas are found in some of the most central and exclusive areas of Tokyo, many of which are designed by Riccardo himself. The property we're going to be speaking about today is the Raintree Daikanyama. Let's go and speak to him now. Today, we're here at Riccardo Tossani's Architecture to talk about a new development that's been worked on here, very close to here in Daikanyamas. But first, I want to talk a bit about yourself. We're both living in Tokyo. You arrived here in the 90s. What has this city gained and what has it quietly lost?
Well, that's a good question, and it's true. In the almost 30 years that I've been here, I have seen changes, significant changes. And the most obvious changes are the tall buildings and the large shopping malls. And then there are somewhat more subtle changes, which are sort of an up-specking of some of the neighborhoods, undergrounding of power lines, and improvement of parks and sidewalks. So we do welcome things like that. But those larger changes, the high-rise development projects, the mixed-use, really gargantuan projects, provide a lot of amenities like, more restaurants. And I wouldn't say more restaurants, but they provide a different range of restaurants and international schools and shopping mall, whatnot, as well as a lot of additional higher-end residential accommodation and office space. But it comes at the expense of what was there before, which was the sort of fabric, a unique fabric of Tokyo neighborhoods, which consist of intimate shopping streets, which are primarily pedestrian, and smaller residential streets and alleys where smaller residences, not more than 3 stories really, typically made up for the neighborhood urban fabric. So it was lower scale by Tokyo standards, and in many ways more affordable, which meant a lot more diversity in the retail and entertainment commercial offerings, and fun. These were memorable neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods actually 30 years is not a long time, but in 30 years we've seen significant portions of the city, that texture, that urban fabric, replaced by large-scale mixed-use projects. And it's ongoing. It continues today in the typical downtown neighborhoods. And that is a loss. I mean, it's come at a cost, a social cost to the city. And the replacement is far less affordable than what it took the place of in terms of the residential rents and costs and the commercial rents and costs. So, this is something, it's a churn that I think most cities experience. Tokyo is not alone. Fortunately, Tokyo is a vast city, so you don't have to go much further out to look for the essence of Tokyo's fun, intimate urban fabric. It is a bit of a creeping phenomenon, but it is concentrated at the center. And what it does do is also add more value, that is to say, it creates an appreciation of real estate values for the residences around it that aren't touched by it physically, these larger development projects, but are adjacent. So, a lot of owners have benefited from this, even if they weren't directly in the path of this kind of development.
Wow. Yeah, no, there's a lot of changes that I've seen even in the year and a half I've been here. You know, there's constantly new development, new building sites, big projects finishing and opening. So it's a very changing city. Yeah, it's really, really quite interesting. Is there a building in Tokyo that you've designed or not designed that you really appreciate and tell people to go and see if they ask?
Yeah. Okay. Well, setting aside the buildings I've designed, which would be rather immodest, although there are a couple that I do suggest people go and have a look at. However, I think there are two buildings that truly stand out in this city. One is a more historical building and the other is a more contemporary building. Both are extremely important, I think, in the history of architecture, Japanese architecture in particular. The older building would be old by Japanese standards. And there's a contradiction there because even though this is a very old society, buildings in cities like Tokyo do not date back very far. A lot of the older structures, I mean, now we're talking about more than 100 years old, they have long since disappeared. What wasn't lost in the war was wiped out through post-war development. Higher and best use, upzoning, that sort of thing. The economics drive the building of the city, and there is no meaningful historic preservation. So Tokyo doesn't really have any old buildings. However, the building that I've found to be most inspiring and that I tell everybody to go and have a look at is the 1964 Tokyo Olympic Gymnasium by Kenzo Tange in Yoyogi. It has a suspension roof, cables that are supported by two end pylons. The roof has this beautiful sublime shape, and it's contained within an ellipse of modernist, actually brutalist concrete that projects out, and it's really one of the most beautiful buildings in the world. And as a young architecture student, I was inspired by photos of that building when I started studying architecture, truly inspired. I had my first aesthetic experience. It's a building that is truly divine. Its inspiration is extraordinary. And that building and the swimming pavilion adjacent to it by Kenzo Tange for the '64 Olympics were influenced by Japanese headgear. I mean, the warrior headgear, some of the shapes and forms of now we're talking about historic Japanese warrior costumes. But nevertheless, as a piece of architecture, it is extraordinarily beautiful from every angle and quite divine in its inspiration. The big idea is glorious and the detail is fantastic. I don't think Kenzo Tange has done anything as good as since or before. I mean, he passed away some time ago, but that's a really high bar. Okay, so that's from the 1964. A more contemporary building, which I do advise people to go and have a look at, especially architects and urban designers, is the Tokyo International Forum by Raphael Vignoli. And that forum occupies a space in Yuracho between two major stations, Tokyo Station and Yuracho Station. As a piece of urban design, it's really wonderful because it's bounded on one side by the curvature of the Shinkansen lines and on the other side by the rectilinear street grid. And it has an internal pathway, open air pathway that connects to subway stations, so it encourages people to pass through it. And the structure consists of a series of auditoria of descending sizes on one side of that central mall, and on the other side, a perfect ellipse, again, bound on one side by the curvature of the railway, and that's reflected to create this ellipse, which is a grand space with a skeletal roof structure that looks just like a fish skeleton supported by two pylons, and that roof truss supports all the glass walls around it. An enormous space with all the window walls, the glass walls supported from above. It's beautiful in the grand idea, and it's exquisite in the fine detail. It was one of the most expensive buildings built in Tokyo, and it is a public building. It's not a commercial building. So there was a time in this society, in metropolitan Tokyo, where the governors of the city were truly interested in good architecture, whether it was designed by Japanese architects or Western architects. Both of those projects, I believe, were the result of international competitions. And both of those projects, I think, represent the greatest architecture of their time, but that is contextually appropriate and that enhances the city. And I recommend especially young architects to go and have a look at both.
No, I have to say the gymnasium in Yoyogi, I fell in love with that place as soon as I saw it. I'm a big fan of brutalist architecture, the movement in the UK especially. So yeah, when I did an article on Kenzo Tange, I went to see it, took some photos. I didn't get the chance to go inside, but outside it's just an absolutely beautiful structure. I really loved it, yeah.
So Japanese brutalism has a fair amount of humanity to it. There's one thing that, I do love about this society. It can take architectural directions out to an edge,
yeah,
but they would seem to be humanistic. There is something about the social cohesion of this culture and a sense of social responsibility that the culture makers in Japan feel at a intuitive level, and it comes out in their architecture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh, great. Since you've been here in Japan, what's something about how you design that you've genuinely changed your mind on? Like, what's developed in your architecture?
There's been a big change, actually. Prior to practice in Japan, I was a practicing architect in Australia, in Italy, and in the United States. And all those places, a little bit lesser so, have the benefit of space, especially in the New World, Australia and the United States. I mean, space is really cheap. And so you don't think about the value of space so much when you're planning and designing buildings. In Italy, I lived in Florence. I was practicing there. There one has to be a little bit more sensitive because it is a medieval city and one is pushing up against history everywhere. But still, compared to Tokyo, not quite the same. What I discovered in Japan very quickly, because of the economics of the cost of real estate and the tradition of the caretaking of property in cities like Tokyo, that space is extremely valuable, extremely valuable. It's expensive, but it's valuable, not to be taken for granted. So every square centimeter counts. You can't waste space here. Lots are small. It's to the nature of the city, the fabric of the city. Housing lots, building lots are quite small, very small compared to the New World and and Europe. And the construction costs in this country have always been high compared to other countries in the progressive developed countries. Very high, actually. So the combination of space being expensive and hard to come by, that is, the land size, and the cost of construction is such that one really has to focus on value, the value of architecture, creating maximum value from a functional standpoint, as well, of course, as aesthetic standpoint, but the maximum value without any wastage of space. And that's not just in the planning of a building, but it's also in the appearance of a building. Given small properties that are expensive, small frontages as opposed to the luxury of a building that sits isolated on its own pad, the visible facades of a building really need to be attended to in a responsible way. There's only so much of a building that you'll see in a dense city like Tokyo because of its neighboring context. So, what you see has to really count. So, the architect can't drop the ball on any of that. Space has to be utilized in a sensible, functional way, and yet it needs to still provide the user or the owner with a sense of expansiveness, light, and a feeling of relaxed comfort that typically comes from spaciousness and light. So light and space are a luxury. We take those things for granted in other countries. Light's everywhere. Space, no problem. In Tokyo, light and space are rare. So to create an architecture that has those constraints, that maximizes the use of natural light through its form and window placements, through the creation of internal spaces that have a sense of spaciousness, and to do all that within the constraints that are typical of this city is a challenge. And to not waste any space, not leave any space left over after planning. Space left over after planning, architects call that slope. It's just wastage. We don't do that here. That would be totally irresponsible. So that really changed my way of practice as an architect, to focus in on the problem, to chip away anything that was redundant and not necessary, and really make the most of the limited resources that are typically available to architects in projects in urban Tokyo. Limited space, limited plot area, and a limited budget. Construction's expensive. Every project has a budget. Making the most of both to create a memorable environment that has the feeling, if not the actuality, of luxury, light, and spaciousness. That's something that I never really had to consider as a challenge before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, space is a big factor here, definitely. As you're walking around, you can see by the size of the houses, and compared to the UK and cities like London, it's still a big difference. You and Atsuko Itoda built the practice together, architecture and interior design under one roof. How does that work? I imagine you're a great team together.
Well, yeah, we started working together 32 years ago in Los Angeles. And 2 years after we met in Los Angeles, we came to Tokyo with the intention of doing some projects, but actually, as it turned out, our work was quite successful from the get-go, and we built an office fairly quickly. And Atsuko is an interior architect. I'm an architect and urban designer. That is our academic and formal background. Both of us are interested in all scales of design thinking, from new towns down to the accessories that one puts in a living room, dining room setting, as well as, of course, furniture and lighting design and all of these things. So the full scale of the architectural spectrum of the built environment is something that excites us because we're designers. And it just so happens that Atsuko's background is more interior architecture and industrial design, and my background is more the larger scale urban planning, urban design, and architecture, less so interiors in my background. So what we found was this mutual interest in the big picture and the fine detail. And what I came away with after my experience in Italy was also the belief that the Renaissance notion of an architect being someone who is responsible for all aspects of the design environment, the designed environment. Architects traditionally, in the Renaissance notion of architect, even though they weren't really called architects in those days, but the Renaissance notion of the craftsman was someone who could design a fortified city, design buildings, design the interiors, design the sculpture that adorns the building outside and inside, design the furniture, paint the frescoes, design all the elements of a building, cast bronze statuettes. This was the mind of the craftsman in the Renaissance. There was no distinction between the different disciplines. In the Renaissance, there were not landscape architects, building architects, planners, interior designers. That didn't exist. You know, the architect, what we call the architect today, was expected to be able to tackle the design thinking necessary at every end of the spectrum of the built environment. Now that to me is a great challenge, and architects in Italy today do still operate that way. So the greatest architects are also known for their furniture and their cutlery and crockery and tea dispensers. Architects do that. Aldo Rossi designed the whole line for Alessi. That's what they do. Because that is the tradition, also because there aren't that many buildings that architects get a chance to make a living from in Italy, but it's what they do, it's how they think, right? Design thinking. So when Atsuko and I came together, we shared these values. This is why I guess we were attracted to each other. And when we established our office in Tokyo, there was a natural understanding that we would be involved in each other's work. So she reviews and participates in the design thinking of our planning and architecture for projects. I am deeply involved and engaged with her in the design thinking of the interior design and furniture design and whatever accessory selection and so forth or design that may come about, because we believe that good architecture, and now I'm using the word as an inclusive term for everything that you would see in a building outside and inside, good architecture comes from the integration of all these so-called disciplines, the integration of all that thinking in a seamless way so that you experience something that doesn't have breaks in it or doesn't confuse you because the interior designer's taste is completely different to what the architect had in mind, for example, or the landscaping is from another place that has little to do with the architecture of the building. the selection of, say, the interior artworks have no resonance whatsoever with the architecture and the interior palette. So we avoid all of that. We have an integrated practice which Atsuko and I, in this fused way, consider holistically as we develop our projects, regardless of what they are.
Wow, that's the best. You get the best of both worlds. Then just bringing them together and being able to discuss those ideas with each other just improves both of your work. I imagine it's amazing.
That's right, and our clients benefit tremendously. It's also much more fee efficient to have everything done in-house as opposed to going out to different consultants. I mean, we don't deny our clients the freedom to do that if they want to, but we have always found that a more integrated approach to design thinking leads to a more successful outcome.
Amazing. Right, so bringing it back to housing Japan, Daikanyama, the area, and the Raintree, the most developed Raintree property that is being developed. You and Housing Japan have worked on projects before, including the Gravitas Minami Azabu property. How is Raintree these Raintree projects and Daikanyama a continuation of this collaboration, and where is it something completely new?
Well, the collaboration is a continuum in that we've worked together now enough to understand each other's strengths, and so we are able to bring about projects that are more resonant with the client's goals that are represented by Housing Japan, and they understand our approach and have a great deal of trust in us to bring about a successful outcome given those parameters. But what we've found now is that, especially with Daikanyama, that we are able to explore some of the more interesting possibilities of neighborhoods like Daikanyama that are less conventional and more youthful in character. Fortunately, our collaboration with Housing Japan enables them to encourage clients to be less conservative in their site selection. And it provides us with opportunities to create architecture on these sites that have greater aesthetic potential, in my opinion. Why? Because there's a challenge. Daikanyama, looking at Daikanyama, for example, Daikanyama sits between an established, high-end, somewhat more conservative neighborhood along the Kyuya Matadori, with embassies and a Baptist church, and most recently some pretty high-end retail buildings, all somewhat conservative, with the exception of what's been happening up there more recently, let's say. And an Aobadai, and along the Megurogawa, which is the other side of Daikanyama, was always more youthful, low scale, cheaper rent, let's say, and more mixed in its character, which enabled the neighborhood to grow as more of a sort of an art colony. Those lower rents meant that young experimenters in retail, boutique stores, artists, little cafes could pop up because the capital expenditure in the initial stage was very low. So we recognize Daikanyama and Albadai as being, and I'm talking about the opposite end of this neighborhood, as being very, very electric and having a lot of urbanistic potential because of the art scene and the experimental nature of that neighborhood. And so our Daikanyama project sits virtually exactly in between the conservative and the experimental. It's really in the middle. And so it has a sort of schizophrenic character to it. On the one side, it's facing what is rather, grand and conservative in its urban character, and on the other side, it's facing a neighborhood that's in constant change and flux, but growing in a fairly rapid way as a place of cafes and boutique stores and experimental establishments. And our architecture then was able to respond to that by being a little bit less conservative, a little less conventional, playing with forms that were a little bolder than we might otherwise resort to in more conservative neighborhoods, and creating facades, two really end facades, one end reflecting the sort of varied character of the neighborhood and so forth, and the other end presenting itself to the street in a more, let's call it conventionally elegant way. So the building itself is a little schizophrenic in its response to its unique position. It is more youthful, it is more experimental, and it sits well in that neighborhood because that is what people love about that neighborhood. And like with any neighborhood of that type anywhere in the world, like the Sohos of London and New York and Los Angeles and Sydney, where the artists go, money follows. And the artists bring the excitement. People recognize that and want a piece of it, and they want a part of it, and they want to be part of that youthful, exciting, experimental character of the neighborhood. And that's what's been happening in the Albadai Daikanyama area. This house, this architecture responds to that. So it's youthful, experimental, a little bit crazy, but it stands there as, I think, a snapshot in time in the evolution of this neighborhood from one state to another.
Amazing. I see what you mean as well. I've had a chance to walk around the Daikanyama area and the street where this property is going to be built, and I can totally understand what you mean by saying that. Yeah, it's a very artistic, very expressive area of Tokyo. It's great. You have good knowledge of Daikanyama. This office is nearby. You've developed some properties there before. I guess you've gone over this slightly before as well with the creative and conservative side sitting in the middle, but what's the difference of a property in Daikanyama, one that's actually of it?
Oh, I think if one again understands the history of Daikanyama, and I'm talking about this part of Daikanyama. Actually, all of Daikanyama has evolved, frankly, towards a more youthful character, and I suspect it's evolved in response to a younger a younger market that has been frequenting the area. So, whereas you did have the staid embassies, as I mentioned before, you now have shops and boutiques that appeal to a much younger crowd than, say, in Ginza. And that's been the case for 20, 30 years probably. And certainly 20 years ago, when we purchased this property, the building, in fact, that we are in, and which is my office, the area wasn't as, let's say, developed as it is now. There were fewer shops and fewer commercial enterprises, and the houses were much more conventional. But what we could see happening was from Nakameguro Station, which is one of, let's say, the corners of the Daikanyama Albadai area, what we could see happening was a growth along the river, the Megurogawa, of these little boutiques and shops progressively outwards, radiating outwards from Nakameguro Station. Nakameguro Station is a nexus, and the Megurogawa joins Nakameguro Station with the next station along the Megurogawa, that is, which is Ikejiri-Ohashi, which also started to see a little bit of growth out from its center along the river. The river and the river walk acted as a natural path for development of a certain type. That development was typically small boutiques, little cafes, little restaurants, vegan cafes, and then we could see this happening. And as students of urban history, we knew that a different layering of development was bound to happen as the neighborhood evolved in this artistic, youthful fashion. We bought this building, which is midway between Nakameguro Eki and Ikejiri-Ohashi, because we knew that it would eventually be in the middle of it all. And we were right. Over time, those little cafes became more and more interesting. More of them cropped up. What was a sort of radial evolution along the river spread out to the sides. And now there's much, much more diversity and variety with the corporates coming in, like the Starbucks concept store. And there's only one or two of them in in Japan, right? They chose this area because they recognized that this was a youthful area that allowed experimentation and that had this character to it, this conceptual character. And now across the street from our office is a laboratory for a luxury product fashion brand. And other fashion brands have come in and created their laboratories here. Nike had their lab here. So why? Because their employees are young creators and they want them to be in a neighborhood of young creators who attract more young creators, who attract money, and who attract people who want to have a house in that environment. So we recognized this 20 years ago and we were right. It's all been happening just as we surmised. And again, it's not rocket science because these kinds of things happen all over the world, but it's happened. So we have been lucky in a way to benefit from that evolution, and we encouraged Housing Japan and their clients to consider this neighborhood for its future potential, and they recognized it as well, and so did their clients.
No, it's definitely a very trendy area, especially down by Nakameguro and the Meguro River down here. It's a lovely area, and yeah, it's understandable why people would like to come here and live here and visit, because it's a wonderful area. And Daikanyama is exceptionally close to the Nakameguro River, the Meguro River just here. Daikanyama Raintree property is 2 buildings on either side. How did you tackle the openness versus privacy problem on this site?
Well, this is a typical condition of most Tokyo properties. Privacy. Security, not so much, but privacy is always an issue. What we want in our residences is some view and natural light and openness and an engagement with the natural environment, which typically means sky and garden, if you've got it. But what we need is also privacy. So our approach has always been to do an in-depth, detailed study of the site. And I'm not just talking about the little, the plot of land that it sits on, but the character of the site at every elevation on that site. What's it like at eye level when you're standing on the ground? What's it like at eye level from the second floor, the future second floor, the third floor, the fourth floor, the roof terrace? What is it like? Where are the view corridors? Where are the gaps between the adjacent buildings? The neighbors are there, but the neighboring buildings also have a certain height and setback. So the view corridors open up as you progress vertically up your site, up the site. So through our detailed site studies and analyses, which include drone perspectives, drone views from every angle, we establish where we're going to get light from, where we get those view corridors, where we get some panoramic view possibilities, and we design around that. We design backwards from that. So we design upwards from the site, we design backwards from those view corridors, because that's where we're placing our windows and our internal larger spaces. We decide on the vertical zoning of our residence, depending on all of those things. Typically, it means we should put the living room, dining room not on the ground floor, but up on an elevated level, maybe the second floor or even the third floor, where it can benefit from light and views to the outside. And again, that sense of space, light and spaciousness. And the spaciousness is amplified by the view potential that particular location, that vertical location within these constrained sites can provide. So Daikanyama is no different. Daikanyama was challenging because, again, it's in a fairly dense little neighborhood, but the views to the north are interesting, to say the least. And certainly the views to the south open up to the sun and have an outlook over the roofs of the buildings below. That particular site is actually elevated one floor up above its southern neighbor because there's actually a hill there. So it's up on a big retaining wall. So the view potential increases as you move upwards through the residence. So our internal planning, like our architecture, but our internal planning is a direct response to these factors. Where is the light? Where are the view corridors? Where's the sun? How does it track across the sky? Where's the morning light? Where's the afternoon light? And where are the protected views? In other words, where is the privacy? So privacy typically impacts how the ground floor is arranged. And then it also impacts how we deal with second floor windows and third floor windows. We have in our Daikanyama property this interesting screen facade, which acts as a privacy screen so that the residents can look out, but it's very difficult in fact impossible for people on the street, say pedestrians, to look up and in. That was a device that was conceived from the mission of creating privacy for windows on that that end, and it became an architectural feature in and of itself as we evolved that device. And the skylights in the Raintree Daikanyama project on our sloped roof. That roof slope is again a response to the mandatory setbacks that every property in the city has to adhere to. In this case, shadow angles and sun angles and so forth. So we have this angled roof, but we have put skylights in that roof so that from inside you have these beautiful views of the sky, and those skylights are on double height spaces with the second level, the higher level within that double height space being the bedroom. From the bedroom, you can look out over the living room through a glass wall, out through the skylight to the western parts of the city. So the location of windows is very strategic for light and views, and because of the nature of the building and the location of those windows, privacy is guaranteed. That's how we deal with it.
Yeah, no, it's great. The facade on the front of the property is in itself an art piece. I love that feature. It's like you say, keeping the privacy while still looking very attractive on the outside as well, and allowing that light to come in whilst keeping that privacy. And the skylights across the slanted roof as well, allowing that natural light into the living space is really important to have that natural light. And the having these zones within the building parameters that are set by the government and the municipal.
That's right. Zoning codes.
Exactly. It's very polite to allow that light that's so valuable in such a dense city to then hit the other properties, whilst also keeping and working around that and developing a way to also take that light into the property being developed. It's very good use of that limitation. It's great. This Raintree, the Raintree Daikanyama, is one of a collection of villas across Tokyo. How do you keep each one a distinct response to its place rather than a house style that's just stamped onto different plots?
Well, that's easy. It's easy because our approach to all our architecture is to look at what the site tells us, what the context tells us is the right approach, the right form for the building. And every site is unique. It's very, especially in a city like Tokyo, there isn't much sameness here. The street pattern is medieval, so it's not a grid. So every site has a bit of a different shape. The context is very varied in terms of the shapes and heights of neighboring buildings. There's a lot of topography in Tokyo, believe it or not. There's lots of hills and valleys, which means every site has a different relationship to its neighbors. It might be higher, it might be lower. And consequently, and our approach is to look for all the formal clues from the site, from its context and from, as I mentioned earlier, view access and sunlight and circulation and so forth. So every Raintree project is unique because each of those Raintree sites has different site conditions, different contextual conditions, different view angles, different strengths that need to be exploited in the formation of the architecture. Not to mention, the zoning is very different from one part of Tokyo to the other. The controls in terms of heights and sun angles and so forth. So when you combine all those things, it's actually very difficult to do the same house everywhere. You can't really, you know. And if you even tried that, there'd be an enormous waste because, you know, you wouldn't be exploiting what the site has to offer. So we approach every project individually. And fortunately, every Raintree project is on a site that was selected by the Raintree team as having something unique about it. Adjacency to green, adjacency to view corridors, adjacency to something. So there was already something in the site selection. And what we do as architects is we come along, we recognize those strengths, and we build on them and make sure that we're creating something that's making the most of what the site and its context has to offer. And that's just naturally different from site to site.
How does this size, we've already discussed the size of the plots in general compared to other countries, but this Daikanyama plot, how does that compare to other plots in Tokyo? It's
not too different. I mean, it's, if I recall, it's about 70 tsubo, so about 230 square meters. I mean, that's sort of around about the right, the average size of a lot of these residential plots in Tokyo. Some are a little bit bigger, some are a little bit smaller. The difference is, how high can you go? How close can you build to the property lines? What are the setbacks? Those things vary a lot. Daikanyama has allowed us a fair amount of GFA, of buildable internal area, and we've tried to max it out without diminishing the character and quality of the architecture and the form. So it's actually a fairly large residence with multiple ensuite bedrooms and a home theatre and a large living dining area with an open kitchen and a roof terrace, right? Notwithstanding the angles and the setbacks that we've had to work with. So I'd say not an unusual plot area for Tokyo.
The property has mixed use, possibly theatre room and 2 bedrooms on the lower floor. How did you keep this from feeling like a basement and keep that light coming down to those rooms?
Well, we have a sunken garden that feeds light into those 2 lower level rooms. That sunken garden, not by coincidence, is on the south side that gets sun. So there's a lot of reflected light, if not direct light, that filters down into that sunken garden. And it is a garden. I mean, the intention and the design of that space is to encourage green growth, and it's not difficult to see the sky as you come forwards to the windows, the floor-to-ceiling windows in those rooms. So those floor-to-ceiling windows that open out into the garden, into this private garden, if you like, also help those rooms feel spacious. So there's plenty of light outside as the landscape grows, once it's planted and given a chance to mature. There'll be lots of green there, and direct sunlight and rain, and the weather is recognizable and ever present in that space. That's the way to do it. The theatre room doesn't want natural light. The nature of that room is such that you want total control over light. And so putting it in that level on the north side was the obvious thing to do. But the approach to the theatre room, the hallway, the stair and the hallway to the theatre room is flooded with light, even though it's in the basement, the lower level, because of the way we designed the stair and the extensive windows at the upper levels of the stairs, the openness and transparency of the stair, so that light filters down all the way down to the basement, so that you have this natural illumination of the hallways to all of those rooms, including the home theatre room.
Amazing, yeah. I really like that those 2 ground floor or below ground floor bedrooms that have the floor to ceiling windows, because and you've been able to do that because the privacy issue is not a problem because it is sunken and there are the walls on either side. So allowing that floor-to-ceiling window and opens the room up. Really, it does. It's really lovely space.
So these help explain to our clients how the house works, especially a complicated house like this.
Yeah.
You recall I said there's this double height space here with the views out the windows that you can enjoy from the master bedroom through this glass panel. So they can look directly out to the western light. And then it's easier then to understand how the stairs and the rooms work. So is the master. This is the master bedroom suite with a nice big bathroom. And let's take this off. That's the third floor. And then the second floor, which is a kitchen, dining, living, and another ensuite bedroom with light out and windows out to the north. And big open views to the south, some windows out this way, and pull this up. And then the stair travels up and down, and then you've got the lowest level, which is the garage level and the entrance, and our stair that goes down to the basement and up, all very transparent with lots of windows that bring light down to it. This is a glass wall. So that the garage is a showroom, a showcase for the beautiful cars that the owners are likely to have. And then some bedrooms, or one large bedroom at the back. And then below that are those two bedrooms and the home theatre in the sunken garden. So these models obviously help everyone understand what we have in mind. One thing that I'm looking forward to seeing, we can't see it now because it hasn't been erected, but it'll be the terracotta screen wall that's on this north side of the residence that provides privacy to the ensuite bathroom and bedroom balcony here, as well as the windows to that room, and provides color and a little bit of an eccentric element to this street. And it's sort of the first clue that there's something special happening. And the second clue would be the roof. As you move around the house, you'll see the roof slanting upwards and across, leading the eye to the third floor, which has a beautiful balcony on this side. It actually has a bit of a view over these rooftops to the sky beyond. And then once we enter into the residence, and again it's behind this screen and the scaffolding, but once we enter the residence, what we see is primarily the stair, the stair hall, with light filtering down, and a large glazed partition to the garage. And in the garage, we anticipate that these owners are likely to have some very nice cars. And that's what we found to be quite typical. And cars are beautiful, functional art. They are objects of desire. And so they should be, I think, put on display if they, for all their beauty and their worth.
Absolutely, no. It's, especially in Tokyo, for 4-car garage is absolutely a luxury, and having them on display. Yeah,
absolutely. So we can go inside, have a look. Okay. So this is mostly the garage. The stairs down to the theatre room and 2 bedrooms. I think we'll go up first. Let's go up. Elevator. And then bedroom here. Okay. So we are in the kitchen.
Yes.
And the dining room and living room are through there. Very hard to understand with all the scaffolding. And then coming through here, well, you can begin to see how much more light there is here. We're higher. We're getting to be about at the same level, if not a little bit higher than some of the adjacent roofs. And then you can see this big window that's going to be happening for the stair hall here. So lots of light that filters down through the stair. The stair is transparent. There's no solid risers, so the stair floats in this space, bringing light down through. And again, a little bit hard to see because we can't really go there, but the dining room and living room extend all the way to here with a fireplace. And then behind that is one of the bedrooms, which is right there, with ensuite bathroom, window, terrace, and the actual bedroom itself with window out to the north. Now, the next floor up, which we cannot really get to, is the master bedroom. And the master bedroom, it's the master bedroom suite actually, and the bedroom itself looks out over the rooftops of the south to the view beyond, and looks to the west through the skylights that will be on the roof canopy. And the master bedroom bathroom at that end, approached along this walkway, which also looks down into the living room and dining room, has a large bath room with a pedestal bath, lots of windows that wrap around so that they can enjoy the views to the north and to the east towards the Daikanyama station, and lots of privacy because we're now elevated up above the street. So this is the sort of character of space and light that we're looking for. You can get a sense of it.
You can really already see this is going to be a slanted roof here with the skylights, and all you're going to see of that is the sky. You know, the angle of all the other roofs next to it, and then on the other side as well, you already you can't see the roofs on the other side either. So there's going to be, like you say, unobstructed sight lines all around.
That's right. So the focus is on the sky, and we're hiding really the adjacent buildings. And I mean, that was done through really a very careful geometric study of where those buildings are in elevation and in plan, and making sure that our sight lines miss them.
Yeah.
They will disappear from view.
Yeah. Exceptional. It's really exciting to see it at this stage and where it will be in another couple of months, and then once it's completed. And talk me through the stairs again. That's almost a signature point of a lot of your architecture, is the light traveling through the stairs. How did you come to that in this particular property, making sure the light could travel through what would otherwise be quite a dark stairway? Right.
Well, I have always objected to stairs being seen as purely the quickest way to get from one part of the building to the other, and without any thought to the design whatsoever. In most Japanese buildings, they are considered as a nuisance, you might say, just an unavoidable nuisance. I look at stairs as being an opportunity for creating sculpture, again, functional art within the building. Stairs are beautiful by nature because they are all about traveling vertically through space. And light is important. So to make the stairs as transparent as possible so they're not blocking light coming down vertically is really important to me. That simply means designing the treads so that they appear to be floating above the stringers, to minimize the risers, the vertical elements, and to really have the stairs as light visually as possible, very light elements that seem to float in a space. Our stairs rarely touch the side walls, for example. They literally float in the space. We just use clever structural tricks with single stringers that we don't really see so much. So the treads all appear to be floating in space. Now that has a second effect, in addition to just being a beautiful object to admire. The second effect is to allow light, natural daylight, to travel through it. And as the light shifts, as the sun shifts across the sky, the shadows that the stairs cast on the floor continually change. A lot of geometry, a lot of light comes between the gaps, or through the gaps between the treads. So it's a little bit hard to predict what it's going to be like, but it's typically always very interesting and dynamic. So it's always shifting. And then approaching stairs that way as a transparent sculptural element within that space, they then become a visual asset, not just a nuisance element within a house. They become a visual asset, something that is beautiful to look at, and that provides daylight down through the shaft to the floors below. So you can see just how much potential there is for daylight. Of course, this will eventually have a roof, but it will have windows. And so that reflected light traveling down to the basement is really important, and wouldn't be possible unless the stairs had a very light geometric quality to them.
Great.
All right.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you very much for inviting us here to see this site today. It's beautiful to see how it's coming on, and I look forward to see it, how it continues to progress and develop as well. So yeah, thank you very much, Riccardo.
Thank you.